You're listening to a DM podcast.
Welcome to Over the Back Fence. I'm Di Edwards.
I'm Nicola Dale, and we're buddies of nearly 4 decades. And yes, we actually do happen to share a back fence.
We do. We love parties, people, inspirational stories, and honestly, making the most out of life.
So join us as we open our hearts, share our stories, and hear from some of the most inspirational people in the world. And have a laugh along the way.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
You know, Nicola, there's times in your life where it can be a person, it can be a documentary, a movie, it can be something that sort of steps into your world, it could be a book, where you just frozen in time with how it washed over you. And Gladys, who we just chatted to, who's 103, this amazing woman who's a holistic doctor, you know, I started reflecting on maybe 4 or 5 of our interviews with different guests. It's really interesting because when we're talking about longevity and happiness with these various guests we've had, it's one common denominator that dilutes down to this conclusion that happiness and longevity is mainly based around attitude, your friends and family that you surround yourself with, and really your thought process.
Yep, and you know what? That's so true. I mean, it's been such an honour having 103-year-old Dr. Gladys McGarey coming on our podcast, so we feel so grateful for that. But totally agree, through all of life, if you live a long life, you're going to go through ups and downs, which she certainly has. But what has got her through so many times is, as you're sort of saying, it's perspective of how you deal with things. And yes, there are times when you need to sit in it. Yes, there are times. And so she gives us some incredible tools, but I don't think there's really anyone who could be much better than her or wiser than her. And with love, with compassion. There's no bitterness there.
No.
A lot of people can go through things and still always hang on to nastiness and grief. And I think that's the other thing too, learning to let it go.
Yeah.
And as we sometimes say, it's easier said than done. Well, she's a living example of that.
She is, 103.
And she's a hoot.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too, she lives with, I think, having a little bit of sense of humour, cheekiness. And she's got it. Here she is, 103, with a 10-year plan. So you look forward to things. She lives in the present.
She does.
And with gratitude. And, so much to learn and so many gifts. And her book, The Well-Lived Life, is like our Bible.
Well, it is. We were talking about it driving in about this is, I think I thought it, and then Nicholas stated it, that this will be our new life Bible. But, I think in our world, Nicola, today, we're so consumed, and I will use the word obsessed by longevity. And she talks about people spend a lot of their life consumed with death, or I don't want to die earlier, I don't want to die, that they forget to live. Mm-hmm. And I think what she's talking about with being consumed, we're talking about exercise, the diet, I can't do that, or I can't drink, I can't do this, I can't do that. She talks about live life well, but again, as you were just saying, we need to self-manage, and she said doctor ourselves, the thought process.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's like they say that 90% of the beliefs we hold in our mind are lies.
Yep. Wow, it's so true.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. She lives with optimism, and she addresses the thing when she was married and her ex-husband had a go at her for going, and she was saying wonderful. Because you say everything's wonderful, wonderful. It's like this toxic positivity. And then she said, if I could have my time again and say something to him, she said, well, you know what? It is wonderful. She said, yes, there are some things that it's not a denial of things when it's bad. Yes, you have to accept it. She said, but I try and find the wonder in every situation. And there's lessons to be learned through even the hardest times when you've been kicked to the curb or things have happened.
Which she has been.
Yes, she has. Yeah. And I think, wow, wonderful. She lives in wonder. And wow, that's a huge takeaway for me.
It is.
I want to live like that myself.
And she also had a really great example with, as soon as we attach to someone else's negativity, as soon as you attach to that, that washes over you. whether you choose to hold on to that or then it dissipates and moves through. Because she also talks about life flow, like allowing the life flow, no matter what's going on in your world, that life flow is always happening.
Yeah.
If you want to put a dam there and then build it up and stop the flow, well, guess what? It's still going to trickle through. It's always there.
Yep.
When you think you're so lost, it's so dark, just reconnect, sit in the awareness of it, and let it flow again, your chi energy, so to speak.
Yes.
And how unique. She's 103. We're not joking, by the way. I mean, a woman being a doctor, A, back then, and B, a holistic doctor. Like, it's fascinating, the book. And when you read it, the
well-lived
life.
Now,
life.
I had it because
You'll learn a lot.
As you always know, I'm the audio girl and Di's more the paperback. But it's one of those books too. If there's sort of something in your life that you just might want to go, hey, I'm going to go on to chapter so and so and listen to this topic.
True.
But she's written a lot of books, and I love the other thing too. She's kicked ass at every age, and she went to full throttle in her 70s. Started again. Went into another practice with her daughter. Written books. Here she is 103 on the public speaking circuit globally. So for everyone, when
and
they
she's
go
in America on the podcast.
So we actually feel like pups die.
It's
we're
so
sort of like babies, really.
Yeah.
There's so much when people think, gosh, I'm turning 40, I'm turning 50, I'm turning 60.
It's true, and you hear that. Yeah. Oh, you hear it on Insta. Yeah, well, 39, turning 40, well, and you go, really?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, that's why in this particular podcast, you're turning 60. I'm in my 60s. A lot of our listeners I know are in their 50s, 60s, 70s and onwards. And it's all about exactly what Gladys lives by. Don't get stuck in a rut. And if you do, as she said, the old baby steps. And honestly, every part of that book, Nicola and I have embraced.
It's one of our favourite subjects. Like,
and I know our producer's going to go out and buy it, aren't you? Yeah,
and I think
pretty
everyone
amazing.
will have the link, obviously, on our show notes there. And she's got other books too, which we'll all put the
and
links
hasn't
to.
she got a 10-year plan ahead?
10-year plan, absolutely. So she'll tell us all. You'll hear all about it, guys. But I hope you really enjoy listening to Dr. Gladys.
You'll love her
as much as we have. Enjoy. Welcome, Dr. Gladys McGarey, the author. You're 103, so first of all, happy birthday, 103 candles on the cake. And you've written the book, The Well-Lived Life. After 60 plus years of experience in holistic and integrated medicine, you're the expert on how to live a long and happy life.
Yeah.
So we're honoured to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Gladys.
Well, I'm so happy to be here.
Gladys, I picked some gardenias and I want to put them into your
Beautiful
crown, which you do with your hair. I wanted to weave them through your hair.
But before we say anything, how's that with Gladys too? You've just come back from a bike ride. Are you serious? You've been bike riding. How fabulous.
I have a tricycle that I can, I ride it out in my yard here.
Wow.
And so the weather is lovely, and so we took a little ride. So I'm a little bit out of breath, but things are good.
That's fair enough at 103, Gladys.
Hey, what did you get for your birthday at 103? Did you get some cool presents?
Oh, yes, I got so many flowers and so many gifts, and it was amazing.
You deserve it. Gladys, I wouldn't know where to start because with a lifespan or a health span, as they say, of 103, Nicola and I were just chatting about, going back in time. I mean, firstly, A, being a woman becoming a doctor, and B, being a holistic doctor. I mean, you overcame so many obstacles.
Well, it was life the way it was coming to me, and I was being presented to it. But the even more exciting thing, I think, is that my mother was a doctor in 1913, but she was not accepted when my dad and my mother went to India. She was on his passport, like baggage.
Wow.
So that was in 1913, and when she got her degree, people really just didn't, they not only didn't recognize it, they just didn't pay any attention to it. They didn't believe it.
Wow.
But, I had the same kind of experience, but not as great as she had. However, she just kept on going. They went out to India and spent all of those years in the jungles of India, which was for me like a paradise. I loved it growing up in the jungles of India.
Do you think that was an influence on you becoming as a holistic doctor living in
Absolutely.
India?
Absolutely, because what I was watching was my parents paying attention to people who had had nobody paying attention to them, and they didn't have much in the way of equipment. Now, when we think about having x-rays and all of the other equipment that we have as physicians, they had none of that. So the thing that they had to use was their own experience, their own knowledge, and the love that they had for the people. I knew that that's what I needed to be. I mean, I told my parents when I was 2 years old that I was a doctor too. And so, they just kind of included that.
And Dr. Gladys, love is such a powerful thing. What's your take on love as a medicine?
It's the most important of all. Without love, none of the other aspects of medicine work. I have what I call the 5 L's. The first is life and love. The first two go together. They don't function without each other. It's like a seed is in the pyramid for 5,000 years and nothing happens until love, in the form of water and sunlight and so on, softens the shell and the seed can grow. Then life is activated by love. And when you think about it, it's like that in a pregnancy. When we women are pregnant, we are one unit with that baby. What we eat, the baby eats. What we think, the baby thinks. But for the months that we carry that child, that unit is one. The unit becomes two, and the baby manifests when it takes its first breath. But in the meantime, you can't separate life and love, because those two together are essential to the proper functioning of the very life of that baby. The third L is laughter. Laughter without love is cruel. Families are torn apart with it. Wars happen. It's mean, it's cruel. But laughter with love is joy and happiness. It makes you want to do the things that you do. It brings your family together. And the fourth one is labor. Labor without love is drudgery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't want to go to work. Too many diapers and all of that. But labor with love is bliss. It's why you're doing what you're doing. It's why singers sing. It's why painters paint. It's the very essence of the very juice within us that is activated with love. And the fifth one is listening. Listening without love is an empty sound. You can hear all kinds of things and not hear a word because you're not listening. But listening with love is understanding. So I think these 5 years ago, I was trying to figure out a way in which I could kind of structure the thinking that I was doing. But these 5 loves have helped me do that.
I actually, here we go
nearly
again.
speechless.
No, I am speaking, and as I said to Nicola, that's very rare that
Joe's never speechless,
No, never but
it's beautiful.
I guess, as I was listening to that, Nicola and Gladys, I couldn't help but think, as a doctor, how reading your book, I mean, that you wove a lot of those L's through your gifts that you gave to your patients.
Yes, because love is a great healer. In the long run, that's the thing that ties us humans together. And so as we accept that and work with it, then healing happens. And I was talking to the leader of one of the hospitals here a few years ago, and he was saying, Gladys, I don't understand how we're going to be able to have the chiropractors and the osteopaths and the naturopaths and all in the same hospital. And I said, well, I don't think it's the modality that is the most important thing here. I think it's the way in which it's used, and love is that activator. So no matter what it is that the modality is that we're using at the time, if it's not used with love, it doesn't do as much or even do anything if the patient doesn't receive it. Just a couple of weeks ago, I have this wonderful friend, he's a neurologist here in town, and he told me a story that had just happened to him because he's still teaching in the medical school, and he had a patient that he was to see with one of the residents. So he told the resident he'd meet her up at the door, patient's door. And when he got up there, she was standing outside of the door, and he said, well, let's go in. And she says, oh, no, we don't have to. And he said, what do you mean we don't have to? She said, well, he has Alzheimer's. He's not going to understand anything. And my wonderful neurologist friend said, now, wait a minute. You don't understand yet that first of all, in that room, there are two people, his wife and the husband, who may have Alzheimer's, but his wife will understand everything that we're saying, and with love be able to transmit that and do it for her husband in ways that will be helpful. It's that unit, it's that bringing that love together. And besides which, he said, we have to go in and touch them. Wow. And so it's this understanding of how important it is for love as the activator to really bring healing about.
Incredible.
Oh, that is absolutely incredible. It's so beautiful to hear that.
And she does look beyond
I know.
Like the normal
and just for some people too, Dr. Gladys, who's still sort of even new to this concept and still might be going, well, I just don't feel the love, and how do I get it? You can say that, but what sort of tips would you say to people who still aren't really there and they go, love, what really is it? I don't know. I haven't felt love. I don't know how to give love. Or what do you say to people to sort of help them and guide them, or your tips?
I'd say, what are you looking for? Because until you're looking for something, you don't see it. Right. And you won't see it, So if life is hard and you think it's just nothing but hard, it's sort of like, you've had a hard time and you're looking over your shoulder because you want to be sure it doesn't happen again or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you're looking over your shoulder. But if you keep looking over your shoulder, your neck's going to get stuck. You're not going to be able to.
You need a chiropractor.
Wow, so it's really looking, like putting your focus and perspective on what you want. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. What it is that you're living for.
Right. Great.
We have to figure out what life is about and what we're living for. It's sort of like if I have a flashlight in my hand and I'm walking along and it's dark and I just can see one step at a time, but I'm going along, but over on the left or over in the right someplace I see a little flicker of light. If I take my light and shine it with that light, there's much more light, and we both find more light. It's that ability to keep looking for what it is and not getting stuck in some kind of horrible, miserable situation. It's like when I was 40, I had been married for 46 years. My husband asked for a divorce, and I was absolutely devastated. I was broken. I was a mess. I was just terrible. And I remember being in my car, driving to my home, which was empty. There wasn't anybody else there. And I was screaming, and it was an ugly scene because I was letting the universe know what I thought about what life was dishing out to me. I was just screaming with pain, and wanting to find some answer to this. How could this possibly happen? And all of a sudden, I stopped the car, pulled off to the side of the road, and I'm sitting there in the car by myself thinking, okay, now, am I going to feel like this the rest of my life? And so I'm having this discussion with myself. And finally, the words came to me. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. But all of a sudden, be glad, my actual name was there right in front of my head. And I said, oh, okay. And I drove home, and the next day I changed my license plate, and my license plate read "Be Glad," so that every day.
I think that's one of the best stories
Incredible.
I've ever,
Continue.
life stories I've heard.
Unbelievable.
Every day that I went to get into my car, I had to read that and say, okay. And as long as I was traveling in Phoenix, which was until I retired, I was driving through the streets, and everybody behind me had to see that light. Be glad.
Yes.
Shining
So
your
not
light.
only-
Wow.
yeah,
And that was
We
a
were
real
sharing-
turnaround for you.
yeah. It turned things around for me. Through the terrible pain that I was. I mean, really, I was a mess. And yet, in the midst of that, because I really knew that I had work to do still, and the actual thing that happened was that I was able to, after going through some more things, I finally wrote a letter to my ex-husband and thanked him for giving me my freedom. So all of a sudden, I became aware that throughout my life, I had depended on him not only to do the checking book and all that kind of stuff, but I would have him check when I wrote a book, I'd have him check what I'd written and so on, because I really didn't trust my voice. However, when I was on my own, I had to trust myself.
Wow.
That's wonderful. And I love how you've actually then even said you've thanked him instead of living with bitterness
Yes.
forever, which so many people can.
And writing it too.
Writing
journal.
it and actually with that, you've found gratitude in that. And tell us, did you find your voice again at 93? Is that correct?
Yes. Well, it took. I'm a slow learner.
What do we say? Students of
love
life.
It's funny, Gladys, you're talking about growing up in India. You grew up in a very loving environment with your parents being missionaries in India.
Right,
And so you had a beautiful foundation stone that you stepped from in life. I want to ask you a question. For those that want to head down that LOVE, love road, and self-love and have more compassion, and didn't grow up with that beautiful, solid LOV around them, can you give us some examples or possibly a modality that someone listening could start their process, start their road to self-love?
Well, start thinking about loving yourself. If you never even think about it, it's not going to go anyplace but be where it's stuck. But when you get to thinking about yourself and the things that are good about you and the things that you kind of like about you, you kind of become friends with yourself, and you can start adding to that, because you're the one who has to think about those things enough to put them into your thought process, because nobody else is going to do it for you. So if you're going to accept the fact that you are here for a reason and there isn't anybody else who can take your place, it's not like a jigsaw puzzle. There isn't anybody else that can fit in that spot. Nobody else in the whole world can take that place. Even in time, there isn't any place. anybody else. It's you. And if you can accept that, that in itself is pretty awesome.
That's beautiful.
Agreed.
That's
Agreed.
beautiful.
Isn't
it?
the power of positivity, isn't it?
It certainly
seeing the beauty
is.
in oneself,
Accepting yourself, and ultimately, like you were saying, Di, from how Dr. Gladys came from that loving family, and other people who may not have come from that loving family, but ultimately, it's up to us to put the focus, on self-love, because it's our life and how precious every single body is, and we're all irreplaceable.
Well, and for every person that was in my life being important, see, my ayah, it's like a nanny.
Nanny.
Yes.
In India,
toothless, ignorant, she certainly wasn't a person that you would look to for style, okay?
Yes.
But she was the epitome of love.
Oh.
And so when I was having this trouble in school, and we were living in the Himalayas, the school was up in the Himalayas, and by the time I climbed the hill up to where our home was, I looked up and there would always be Aya sitting there waiting for me. And as soon as I got up high enough so she could see me, she'd hold out her arm with the shawl on it her chadar that she wore. She'd hold that out and she'd say, Israel, come here. And I'd go running over to her and I'd climb in there and I'd sit there until my world came back into focus.
Wow, love.
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 Yeah, love.
Touch. Time, talk, touch.
Yeah, they say those three
Gladys,
things well.
I actually have to be honest with you. Nicola and I Nicola's more of an audio. She reads books by audio. I'm more of, I've got to have the hard, hold that book, share it, whatever. But I listened to your book on Audible yesterday. That was the second time because I'm so consumed by it. I want to ask you a question. I love one of the lines you use a lot in the book. When we are stuck, look for the trickle around the dam. Can you tell us about that?
Well, life needs to move. If life gets stuck, it dies. It can't live if it gets stuck. To be alive and to work our purpose, whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing, we have to be alive. Otherwise, we get stuck. And if we get stuck, we die. So the way to understand that is to understand that it's not crossing the Pacific Ocean that you're talking about. You're talking about just a little bit of life. It doesn't have to be a lot, just a trickle around the edge that is the aspect of love that is the thing that is keeping you from being stuck. And it isn't a huge thing. My Aya wasn't a beauty or some person that, was huge. My Aya was my Aya. And she was who she was. And that was enough, That was enough. It's accepting what is, the way we are, and accepting the fact that it's enough. Let me tell you another story that illustrates this. For years, we had a good family friend named James, and he was a friend of the family, and he was around all the time. And then he began losing thoughts and so on, and ultimately became quite damaged in the way he was able to relate to life. And so we found a lovely home for him, and he was living in that home. And one day I bought a little plant and I took it over to him. And I said to him, James, because he's just, as far as I could tell, he wasn't understanding anything I could say. So I kept talking anyway. And I said, James, this little plant is your plant. And it loves you, but you have to love it. And if you love it, you have to give it water and you have to give it sunlight. And I talked to him about as far as I could tell, he wasn't understanding anything. But that's all right. He was James, and I loved him, and he was a good friend of ours and all of this. So then I left, and I came back a week later, and he met me at the door, and he's going, magic, magic. And I said, what? And he says, box. And so he takes me over to the wall where the air conditioning box is. And he says, push button, cool. Plant loves cool.
Oh, wow.
Oh, he's giving love.
He says, push hot. Plant doesn't love hot.
Wow.
So here he had, in his own way, taken the love, that as much love as he could understand, and he gave it to the little plant. It was like a little trickle, you know.
Right, the trickle
Around
ran
the
down.
plant. And the little plant understood it. And the little plant said, okay. And this is what evolved.
It's funny,
So
we complicate things, don't we, Gladys?
Oh,
We make
yeah.
it larger than life, the ripple effect, and we catastrophize. But if we start small, start simple, like the trickle, as you talk about, like the plant, the James's plant, it's the simplicity that we're missing out on.
Yeah, it's so important to understand the little things. The big things that happen to us in life, we think are great, and they are. But it's the little things that happen in life that support what can become the great things.
And burst the dam eventually.
Burst the dam.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, and what a great example to share that with us. Well, the power of that. And it's so important, Dr. Gladys, what you're saying is to give love.
Yes.
So people are sort of all wanting to receive love, but it's the power of giving love.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't bank it. It doesn't work that way. Love has to be moving. I truly believe, now this is just my thought, it's not any theology or anything, it's just a thing that I think. I think that when God, whoever God is to each one of us, created the earth, and it was beautiful. I mean, everything was perfect, right in place where it belonged, and so on. And then God created the human. And he said to us, now, you're the only beings on this planet who have free will and choice. So you are being given dominion over the earth. And we, in our arrogance, thought he said domination. And so we took over, by golly, and we've done the things that we've done to Mother Earth all these years, and it's little by little, we've kind of really made it awfully hard for her. And yet, like E.T., looking for home,
Phone home.
Yes.
Phone home.
I think we humans are always trying to reach for our true humanity. And if we're doing that, then it's like reaching, like James understanding what his plant needed. It's not a big thing. It's just something that's there, and it's needed then, and it's what it is.
Love and nurturing.
Love and nurturing, and it's just so beautiful that you can just to give us those, as you say, simple reminders, but they're the small things are the big things in life, aren't they? It's the beating of your heart.
It's true.
Type of things.
There's so much we need to get through in a short space of time.
Exactly.
Just quickly, and I know I'm jumping here, Gladys, when you had cancer the first time, you used many holistic modalities to come through that. Then you got a second bout of cancer and you were older and you felt that you needed to work with the Western medicine, but you also used a thing called visualization. Can you describe that to us, and particularly in the case of the suitcase you used to help cure your cancer?
Well, the word cancer tends to be a huge thought form that scares the living bejeebers out of us. And if that's all we can think of when somebody says cancer, that's all we're going to be able to think of. But if we can grab hold of our minds and say to ourselves, okay, so that's the diagnosis. Now what are we going to do with it? Or do some self-talk about how we're going to use this information. And when I used it before, the circumstances were completely different. And this time, medicine had progressed to a point where it had other modalities that were available to us and understanding of how this could be done. I mean, this was 35 years later or something like that. And things had changed and come to a point where I could actually begin to visualize a way in which I could create a visualization that would work for me. And that was that I said to this lump of cancer that was in my breast, all right, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a family reunion and we're going to pull any other cells that are in my body that are cancer cells into a family reunion. And I have this little box, this little suitcase that I've made where we can all get into this suitcase. And in my mind, I had this little suitcase that was hand tooled and all, and it was a cute little suitcase. And I said to the lump, get in touch with every cell in my body that's a cancer cell. And you guys get into this suitcase because the day is going to come when we're going to go on a journey. And so when the day came for me to have the lumpectomy and then the radiation treatment, in my mind, I said, okay, this is the day, and we're going to go on this trip. And here you are. Here's your suitcase. Get yourselves in there and take your trip, So for me, it was an exercise in actually putting my mind and thoughts where I've been talking about putting them.
Yeah.
Wow. It's all mindset.
And you cured yourself.
Yeah.
Well done.
Isn't it? Yeah, well done you. And it really is sort of like you give so many examples of just the power of your thoughts, the power of your mind.
And you know what's interesting, listening to the book yesterday, doing it Nicola's way with the Audible, you were talking about how community is fast disappearing, Gladys, and we need to borrow a cup of sugar again, as there's so many apps to deliver everything to your house where you're sitting there. Let's just say you're all on your own in your house, sitting there. You can have everything delivered. You're dry cleaning your groceries, a hairdresser can come to your house, whatever. But you say we need to borrow a cup of sugar from the neighbours again.
Yes.
So what's your take on that, like where we are now with community and where we are at and how
Uber
essential
Eats,
that
yeah.
is?
Start looking for your community. If you're not looking for it, you're never going to find it.
Yeah.
You're not going to find the sort of like, if I have any life within me, life that is light, which is what it is, and I reach to other people with that light, it's going to start a community. And the community starts with each person. So it may be just somebody in the grocery store who's having a little problem and you smile at them. Who knows?
Oh, it's so beautiful.
But I just love the simplicity of we need to borrow a cup of sugar again from the neighbour.
Exactly.
Because that's what it was. Like we
It's-
called our podcast Over the Back,
Back
Fence
Fence,
because we felt that that's lacking. You get my point with the neighbour saying, how are you? That's
Yeah.
all. How
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah.
In the morning we say, how are you? Or, well, I was doing a lecture for my son, Bob, who has the Human Potential Center in Austin, Texas, years ago. And when he introduced me, he said, I come from a very weird family. So everybody laughed, But this woman that spoke after he spoke started her lecture off by saying, well, I am Welsh. I come from Wales. And when we greet each other in the morning, we don't say, good morning, how are you? We say, good morning, how is your weird?
That was your weird.
Wow. That's
What
new.
we see as our weird is that inner core within us.
Wow.
Isn't that
I'm
great?
loving
That
that.
is so great.
Something
Di. I
new.
think that's something I
Yeah.
can say to you.
It's very soulful, baby.
Yeah. How's
Very
your weird,
soulful.
Didi?
Oh, it's going okay. It's
I reckon
flowing.
I think we
there's not a trickle. It's a flow, baby.
It is a trickle. Can I ask you, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, Dr. Gladys, turning that clock back, if there's anything you could say to yourself?
I'd say this moment, being that moment or whatever moment, is the most important moment of life.
Present.
Oh,
Because if we live that moment, we can live the next.
oh,
And then we can live the next. But if we don't live that life, that moment, if we're just too hurt or damaged or sad or stuck and don't live that moment, that moment's going to be very sad.
Yeah.
Well,
living in the past or the future.
living in the yeah. Wow.
Second question, Gladys. If you had the opportunity of meeting anybody in the world over the back fence, who would that be and why?
You.
Oh, you're good. As my father used to say, you'll get on.
Can I question it? Is that we?
Yeah, you, as in us too. Absolutely.
Well, we're honoured.
that was beautiful.
Oh, that is.
You're the one that I'm speaking to.
Okay,
Oh,
see,
that's
being present.
precious.
Because
That's
you know
just-
what, Gladys, I thought you'd say Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, well, at that time it was.
You
But
see?
today,
Yeah.
Wow.
You are the ultimate in
Yep.
living in the present.
Yep.
You're the ultimate at teaching us all about life. You know, your
103,
book
longevity.
is an absolute must read. As we're saying, it is our Bible. And thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time and your
thank you.
Thank you,
wisdom and your
Gladys.
heart and your love.
Yeah, we love all the
Great.
L's, the laughter, the love, the labour. We love it all. And honestly, Gladys, at 103, we'll interview you when you're 203.
Yes, exactly. Well, you got the 10-year plan. I think 10 times 10.
I'm more like, yeah, baby. Oh, we think you're an inspiration to the world, and you know what you are? You are an angel on earth.
You are an angel on earth.
thank you.
Yes, thank
It's
you.
because of-
And we look forward to seeing you when we come and visit, or if you ever come and visit
Yeah.
to Sydney.
I'll teach
But-
you how to
yeah.
surf, Gladys.
Have you done that?
I have friends in Australia. I'd love to go.
Oh, please.
Well, there's a back
Please.
fence there.
Yeah.
You've got us. And
Can't
you've got
wait.
everyone. I'm sure all our listeners here. In everyone's heart and soul. And we thank you so much for your time.
Bless you,
Yeah,
Gladys.
bless you, Gladys.
Bless you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. And don't forget to rate and review. And how many stars, Didi?
This week, why not 10 out of 5?
10 out of 5. Okay. I reckon reach for the stars. But thanks for listening. And don't
And
forget
follow
to follow.
us.
Yeah.
That's so important. If you love the podcast, follow.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it and look forward to chatting with you soon.